This is former President Bill Clinton. Quote, Hamas was perfectly well aware of what would happen if they started raining rockets on Israel. They fired 1,000 of them, and they have a strategy designed to force Israel to kill their own civilians so the rest of the world will condemn them. President Clinton, not an Israeli, a man who worked hard to create peace between Palestinians and Israelis.
With all due respect to Mr. Clinton, unfortunately, the world doesn't want to blame the Israelis. Why do you call for security for Israel, and why do you call for lifting the siege and stopping the occupation of the Palestinians? Why don't you give the right to live for the Palestinians as the other nations? This is actually the last occupation in the world.
A revealing interview conducted by Charlie Rose, pointed questions, and as one might expect, plenty of fuzzy and misdirected answers from the man who leads the Hamas terrorists. Ceasefires come and go, yet missiles still fly, people are still dying. And why should anyone believe a single word that comes from the mouth of Khalid Mashal? Welcome back to MidPoint, and welcome into MidPoint, special counsel to former President Bill Clinton, and one who has been on the inside of such intimate discussions many times. Lanny Davis joins us. Lanny, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I have to say, when I worked in the Clinton White House, my expertise was not in foreign policy, but thank you.
Not in foreign policy, but certainly just being in that certain area, you know how people think. Let's put it that way. The president, when he said that, as Charlie Rose indicated when he pointed out a quote from Bill Clinton, President Clinton was correct, was he not?
Well, of course he was correct, and the man who said he wasn't correct has been designated by the world community as a terrorist, which is defined his organization as intentionally targeting women, children, and civilians for whatever purpose. That's the definition of terrorism. And he boasts that that's exactly what he's doing, because the rockets that Hamas is launching towards Israel are intentionally aimed at civilian populations. It is not the case that Israel is intentionally aiming to kill civilians. Indeed, they do the opposite. They make telephone calls and text messages, warn people, including Hamas, to get themselves out in order to avoid being killed. So the difference that a terrorist who doesn't think there's a difference between intentional killing of people and unintentional killing of people is exactly why he is defined as a terrorist and why nobody accepts us as a legitimate spokesman for the Palestinian people, including, I would say, the Palestinian Authority.
What can the Palestinian Authority, if anything, do at this point? Well, you just pointed out is correct, because you have the Palestinian Authority and you have Hamas. It is not the authority that is in there that is allegedly trying to kill their own people and use them as human shields. It is Hamas. So the world is going to ask then if you are on them into rain.
Well, first of all, thanks for reminding me that another failure, which this immoral individual who thinks there's a justification for killing civilians as part of his fanatical cause, which he told Charlie Rose that he doesn't believe that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish nation, which is the basis of its founding and has been recognized throughout the world other than by his terrorist organization, that he has used human beings, children and women, hospitals, schools, homes, as shields for his rockets that are intentionally aimed at civilians. That's a double war crime. And I use the word war crime. Literally, the definition of a war crime is using civilians as human shields to use an offensive weapon. So the answer, I'm sorry to say, is that Mr. Abbas and the Palestinian Authority decided to try to reconcile with a terrorist organization in creating a unity coalition with Hamas. And they've put themselves in the position of being peripheral to where they should be, which is the government of people living in Gaza who are the victims of Hamas, not who are being protected by Hamas.
Is it fair to say then that if there are those people who look at what Mahmoud Abbas has done with giving Hamas certain authority here, that in many ways the current Palestinian government itself has just as much blood on their hands as this man does and Hamas does for every person that dies?
Well, I'd be a bit more sympathetic to Mr. Abbas and the Palestinian Authority's position. They haven't, by choice, given that authority to the terrorist Hamas organization. They were ousted from Gaza by force after an election in which Hamas had a plurality of the votes, and then they were ousted by force. Their attempts at reconciliation is a political judgment. I think it was a poor judgment, but I give Mr. Abbas the benefit of the doubt. I believe Israel wants to do business and wants a two-state solution, and probably would have a better chance of getting one if the Palestinian Authority were back in charge in the Gaza area. In the latest poll, what it's worth, before this intervention, when it was possible to do legitimate polling, had 80% of the Palestinians living in Gaza opposing Hamas. So this is a coup by a militaristic terrorist organization, again, without using labels, that boasts that it's aiming to kill civilians in Israel and favors the destruction of Israel as a Jewish state. I think that the world needs to stop falsely equating the deaths of civilians where one is intended and the other is not.
I only have a minute left. Here's what some people will say, and what I have heard. Why do the people on the ground themselves, the citizen, the men, the women, the children, the people who are being used as human shields, why can they not stand up and fight against Hamas and stop Hamas from using them as human shields? Or are they simply just at this point, they don't see any other way, and that they are in complete agreement with what Hamas is doing?
Well, I think that they are the victims of having guns pointed at their heads. And when people are facing terrorists with guns, again, terrorism means people who are willing to kill civilians, use babies, mothers, civilians as shields while they launch rockets at Israeli civilians. They are being occupied. So I think I'll agree with this man on. But they're being occupied by Hamas, the brutal force of Hamas terror, and they don't have the ability to express themselves, as 80% of the population appear to have expressed themselves in the most recent poll before this intervention.
And that is the shame for many of the people there as well. Lanny Davis, thank you so much for joining us today. Please, let's come back. We'll do it again. We'll learn a little bit more. And again, why trust Hamas? There's no reason to. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
It goes back and forth between those who believe and those who do not. Other side of the break, we head for New York City. We'll find out what's coming up on the Steve Molsberg Show. It's right here on the Newsmax TV network.